In the quiet stillness of an early morning along the banks of the Nile, before the sun has fully risen and before the heat begins to press softly against the earth, a young boy wakes from his sleep on a simple woven mat, the air around him cool and faintly touched with the scent of damp clay and river reeds. And for a few long moments he does not move at all, as if holding on to the last traces of a dream that is already beginning to fade into the pale blue light of dawn. The world outside is calm, almost motionless, with only the distant sound of water shifting slowly against the shore and the soft murmur of wind passing through clusters of papyrus. And inside the modest home, built from sun-dried mud bricks that have absorbed the coolness of the night, there is a gentle sense of quiet routine waiting to unfold, a rhythm that repeats itself day after day with very little change. He sits up slowly, rubbing his eyes, feeling the rough texture of the mat beneath his fingers, and he listens for a moment to the faint movements of others in the house, perhaps a parent already awake, perhaps the quiet preparation of food, perhaps nothing at all. Just a deep and steady silence that often lingers in these early hours before the village fully stirs. This is not a day of celebration, nor a day of rest, and there is nothing unusual about it at all, because for this boy, like many others in ancient Egypt, this is simply a school day. There is no excitement in the air, no anticipation of something new or surprising, and yet there is a certain calm predictability that settles over everything, like a soft layer of dust that never quite lifts. And in that predictability there is a quiet kind of comfort, even if it is not something the boy would ever stop to think about. He rises to his feet, stretching slightly, and begins the small, familiar tasks that mark the beginning of his morning, movements that have been repeated so many times that they require no thought at all, as natural as breathing, as steady as the slow flow of the Nile itself. Outside, the sky gradually shifts from pale blue to a warmer shade, and the first light of the sun begins to spread across the land, touching the tops of distant buildings, the edges of fields, and the soft surface of the river, which reflects the growing brightness in soft, wavering patterns. The village awakens slowly. A door opens somewhere nearby with a quiet creak, footsteps press gently into the dry earth, and the faint sound of voices begins to drift through the air, low and unhurried, as people move into their daily routines without urgency, without haste, because there is no need to rush. Time here moves differently. For the boy, the morning continues in this same quiet way as he prepares himself for school, not with books bound in covers or neatly arranged materials, but with simple tools that have been used for generations, tools that are both ordinary and deeply important in a world where writing is a skill not everyone possesses. He gathers what he needs, perhaps a wooden palette with small depressions for ink, a few thin reeds carefully shaped into writing brushes, and a piece of papyrus or a smooth shard of limestone. And he handles these items with a kind of quiet care, not because they are rare, but because they are necessary, and because they represent something that reaches beyond the small walls of his home. Education in ancient Egypt is not filled with excitement or creativity as one might imagine, but instead is built on repetition, discipline, and patience. Long hours spent copying symbols, memorizing phrases, and practicing the careful formation of hieroglyphs until the hand learns to move without hesitation. There is no rush to explore new ideas, no lively discussions or sudden moments of inspiration, only the steady, quiet work of learning to write, again and again, line after line, day after day. And yet, this quiet work holds a certain weight, because to learn writing is to step into a different path in life, one that leads away from the heavy labor of the fields and into the calm, shaded spaces where scribes sit and record the world in careful, measured strokes.
The boy may not fully understand this yet, but it is there, in the background of everything he does, like the distant presence of the Nile that shapes the land without ever needing to announce itself. As he steps outside, the warmth of the rising sun begins to settle gently on his skin, and the ground beneath his feet is cool but slowly warming, and he begins to walk along a narrow path that winds through the village, passing by other homes that look much like his own, their walls smooth and sun-baked, their doorways open to the morning air. Other children appear along the path, walking in the same direction, their movements unhurried, their faces calm and quiet, and there is very little conversation between them, not because they are unfriendly, but because there is simply not much to say. This is a routine they all know. They walk together, not as a group filled with energy or chatter, but as a slow and steady line of small figures moving through the soft light of early day, their shadows stretching gently behind them, their footsteps blending into the quiet rhythm of the village. The school itself is not a separate building in the way one might expect, but rather a space within a larger structure, often connected to a temple or an administrative area, a place where learning is closely tied to the work of writing and record-keeping that supports the entire society. When they arrive, there is no grand entrance, no sense of crossing into a special place, only a continuation of the same quiet atmosphere, the same muted tones, the same slow passage of time. They enter the space and take their places on the floor, sitting on mats or directly on the cool surface beneath them, arranging their tools carefully in front of them, preparing for the long hours that lie ahead. The teacher is already there. He sits with a stillness that feels almost as solid as the walls around him, his presence calm but firm, and he watches as the students settle into their positions, his gaze steady and observant, taking in every small movement without the need for words. There is no greeting, no introduction to the day. Instead, the work begins quietly, almost without notice. A phrase is spoken, slowly and clearly, and the students listen, their attention focused, their bodies still. And then they begin to write, each one copying the same words onto their surface, their hands moving carefully, deliberately, as they try to match the shapes they have been taught. The sound that fills the room is soft and repetitive, the faint scratching of reed against papyrus or stone, a steady rhythm that continues without interruption, without variation, like a gentle, unchanging pattern that stretches on and on. There are no sudden changes, no bursts of activity, only repetition, the same symbols written again and again, the same phrases repeated until they become familiar, and the same quiet concentration held for long stretches of time. And as the morning moves forward, the light in the room shifts slowly, growing brighter, then warmer, the shadows changing their shape along the walls, marking the passage of time in a way that feels almost unnoticeable, as if the day itself is drifting forward without effort. For the boy, the hours pass in this calm, steady way, his hand growing more accustomed to the movements, his mind settling into the rhythm of the work. And although there is no excitement, no sense of adventure, there is also no chaos, no uncertainty, only the quiet, predictable flow of learning that asks nothing more than patience and attention. And outside, beyond the walls, the Nile continues its slow and endless journey. The village carries on with its daily life, and the sun climbs higher into the sky, while inside, the simple act of writing continues, line after line, in a world where even education moves at the same gentle, unhurried pace. And without any clear moment of change, without any signal or announcement, the morning continues to unfold, quietly, leading into the long stretch of the day that still lies ahead.
As the morning light grows stronger and begins to settle more firmly across the walls of the school,
The quiet rhythm inside the room remains almost unchanged, as if time itself has decided to move more slowly here, stretching each moment into something longer, softer, and more still. And the boy continues to sit with his tools laid out before him, his posture steady, though not entirely comfortable, his focus gently held on the lines he is copying, even as his thoughts begin to drift in small and quiet ways. The teacher's voice rises again, not loud, not sharp, but firm and even, carrying across the room with a calm authority that does not need to repeat itself, and another phrase is spoken, one that has likely been heard many times before, a simple instruction, a line of wisdom, or perhaps a piece of moral teaching that is meant to guide not only the hand, but the character of the student as well. The boy listens carefully, as he has been taught to do, and then lowers his gaze once more to his writing surface, dipping the tip of his reed into the small pool of ink on his palette, watching as the dark liquid gathers at the edge before he brings it down to the surface, forming the first symbol with slow and careful precision. Each movement must be controlled, each line must be deliberate. There is no space here for rushing, no reward for speed, only a quiet expectation of accuracy, of patience, of steady repetition that builds skill little by little, almost without notice. Around him, the other students move in the same way, their hands rising and falling in a slow, shared rhythm, their attention focused inward, and the room is filled with that same soft scratching sound, a sound so constant that it almost disappears into the background, becoming part of the stillness rather than interrupting it. From time to time, the teacher moves. His steps are quiet but noticeable, the soft shift of fabric, the gentle press of feet against the ground as he walks between the rows of students, pausing beside one, then another, observing their work without haste, without interruption, simply watching for a moment before moving on. When he does speak, it is brief, a correction, a single word, a quiet reminder. There is no long explanation, no detailed guidance, because the learning here is not built on discussion, but on imitation, on repetition, on the slow shaping of habit through constant practice. The boy feels the presence of the teacher as he passes nearby, a slight tightening in his shoulders, a deeper focus in his movements, and he carefully adjusts the curve of a symbol, trying to match it more closely to what he has seen before, to what he knows is expected. Mistakes are not dramatic here. They are not met with anger or loud reaction, but they are noticed, and being noticed is enough. So the boy works carefully, his breathing slow, his attention steady, even as the warmth of the day begins to settle more fully into the room, the coolness of the early morning gradually fading, replaced by a gentle, persistent heat that seems to press softly against everything. The air becomes heavier, stiller, and the pace of the room, already slow, feels even more drawn out, as if each moment is being stretched just a little further than before. Outside, the sounds of the village have grown more present, though still distant and muted, the occasional call of a worker, the faint movement of animals, the soft rustle of activity that continues beyond the walls, reminding the students, perhaps without them fully realizing it, that there is a larger world moving on while they remain here, seated, writing, repeating. The boy's hand begins to feel the strain, not sharply, not painfully, but as a dull, steady tiredness that settles into his fingers and wrist, the result of holding the reed, of guiding it again and again across the surface, forming the same shapes with careful attention. He shifts slightly, adjusting his position, trying to find a small comfort without breaking the quiet order of the room, and then continues because there is nothing else to do. There is no variation in the lesson, no change in activity, only the next line, and the one after that, and the one after that. Time moves forward, but it does not feel as though anything truly changes. And yet, in this stillness, something is slowly taking shape. The boy's hand grows steadier, his movements more confident. The symbols begin to form with less hesitation, less uncertainty, as if the knowledge is settling into him, not through sudden understanding, but through quiet repetition that slowly becomes second nature. This is how learning happens here, not in moments of clarity, but in long stretches of calm effort, not in excitement, but in stillness. Eventually, as the sun climbs higher and the light begins to press more directly into the room, there is a subtle shift, so gentle that it might almost go unnoticed at first, a pause in the teacher's voice, a stilling of movement, a quiet moment where the steady rhythm seems to soften just slightly. It is not a break in the way one might hope for. There is no clear signal, no announcement, but the students sense it, a small easing, a brief moment where the hand can rest, where the reed can be set down, where the eyes can lift, if only for a short time. The boy slowly straightens his back, feeling the stiffness that has settled there, and he lets his gaze drift toward the open space beyond the room, where the brightness of the day is now fully present, the sun high enough to cast strong, steady light across the ground. The air outside shimmers faintly with heat. The world continues, unchanged. Some students shift quietly, stretching their fingers, rolling their shoulders, but there is no conversation, no laughter, only a shared silence that feels almost as structured as the lesson itself. After a short while, the teacher speaks again, and the moment passes as gently as it came, folding back into the steady rhythm of the day as the students return to their work without resistance, without complaint, as if this pattern is not only expected, but deeply understood. The boy picks up his reed once more, dips it into the ink, and begins again, line after line, symbol after symbol, the same quiet motion repeated with care. And as the afternoon slowly approaches, the warmth deepens, the shadows shift again, and the long, unbroken flow of the school day continues, calm and steady, with no urgency to reach its end, only the quiet certainty that it will, eventually, fade into evening, just as every day does.
As the day moves quietly beyond the midpoint of the sun's slow climb, the air within the school grows warmer still, settling into a steady heat that no longer feels new or noticeable, but instead becomes something constant, something accepted without thought, like the silence, like the repetition, like the steady presence of the teacher watching over the room. The boy continues his work, though now his movements carry a deeper heaviness, not from any sudden fatigue, but from the slow accumulation of many small efforts, each line written, each symbol repeated, each moment of careful attention adding to a quiet tiredness that rests gently in his body. His fingers move with less hesitation now. The shapes come more easily, but the effort does not disappear. It simply changes, becoming something softer, more automatic, as if his hand has begun to remember what his mind no longer needs to actively guide. Around him, the other students remain in their places, their postures slightly shifted from the morning, some leaning just a little more forward, others sitting a bit more loosely, but all still engaged in the same quiet task, the same slow practice that fills the hours without interruption. There is no sense of nearing the end of the day, no visible sign that time has passed, only the subtle movement of light across the floor, the gradual deepening of warmth, and the steady continuation of the lesson. From time to time, the teacher calls upon a student to read aloud. The voice that answers is often soft, careful, sometimes uncertain, speaking the memorized lines with a steady pace, repeating words that have been practiced many times before, words that carry meaning but are spoken here not for discussion but for accuracy. The boy listens when others speak, though his attention drifts in small, quiet ways, following the sound of the voice for a moment, then returning to the surface in front of him, where the next line waits to be written. There is no rush to finish, no reward for completing more than others, only the expectation that the work will be done, carefully, correctly, and without complaint. Outside, the brightness of the day has softened slightly, though the heat remains, pressing gently against the earth, and the distant sounds of the village continue, unchanged, as if the world beyond these walls moves in its own steady rhythm, separate yet somehow connected. The boy's thoughts begin to wander more often now, not in a way that breaks his focus completely, but in small drifting moments where his mind moves beyond the room, beyond the lines of writing, toward the open space of the river, toward the quiet movement of water, toward the feeling of standing outside with nothing to do but watch the day pass by slowly. But each time he returns, not because he is told to, but because the habit of attention has already begun to take hold, guiding him back to the task with a gentle firmness that does not need to be enforced. This is how the day continues, not with change, but with endurance, not with excitement, but with calm persistence. At some point, though no one marks it clearly, a simple meal is taken. It is not a break in the way one might expect, not a time filled with movement or conversation, but a quiet pause where small portions of food are eaten slowly, perhaps bread, perhaps a few dates, perhaps something simple and dry that requires little preparation. The boy eats without hurry. The taste is familiar. The act itself feels like part of the same rhythm as everything else, another small, repeated pattern in a day made entirely of such patterns. Water is taken in small amounts, enough to ease the dryness of the mouth, but not enough to create any sense of refreshment beyond what is necessary. There is no indulgence here, only sufficiency. And when the meal is finished, the work resumes just as quietly as it paused, as if nothing has truly changed at all. The boy returns to his place. His tools are where he left them. The ink still rests in its shallow space on the palette. The surface before him waits, and so he begins again. The teacher introduces another line, another set of symbols, perhaps slightly more complex, perhaps carrying a lesson about obedience, about respect, about the value of learning and the importance of discipline. Ideas that are repeated often, not in varied forms, but in steady, familiar phrases that settle into memory through constant use. The boy copies them, carefully, slowly. His hand moves with growing confidence, but his body feels the length of the day now, the quiet weight of hours spent in one place, the stillness that has been maintained for so long. He shifts slightly again, adjusting his legs, straightening his back, then leaning forward once more, finding a position that allows him to continue without drawing attention. The teacher notices everything, even the smallest movement, but he says little because there is no need. The order of the room holds itself. The expectation is understood. As the afternoon deepens, the light begins to change again, growing softer, less direct, casting longer shadows that stretch slowly across the floor, marking the gradual approach of evening in a way that feels gentle and unhurried. The air, though still warm, carries a hint of cooling that will come later, a promise of relief that is not yet present, but quietly approaching. The boy senses this change, not as a thought, but as a feeling, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that reaches him without needing to be named. And still, he writes, line after line, the same careful movements, the same steady rhythm. There is no final lesson, no clear ending. The day does not build toward a conclusion.
It simply continues, and then, slowly, it begins to ease. The teacher's voice grows less frequent. The pauses between instructions stretch a little longer. The students, though still quiet, seem to hold a faint awareness that the end of the day is near, not through any signal, but through the subtle changes that have come to mean something over time. The boy finishes another line, then another. He pauses briefly, looking at what he has written, not with pride or disappointment, but with a simple recognition that it is done. And then, at last, without announcement, without ceremony, the teacher allows the work to stop. There is no dismissal in the way one might expect, no sudden release, only a quiet understanding. The students begin to gather their things slowly, carefully, placing each item where it belongs, as if the order of the day must be maintained even as it comes to a close. The boy rises to his feet, feeling the stiffness in his legs, the lingering tiredness in his body, and he takes a moment to steady himself before stepping away from his place. Around him, the others do the same. No one rushes, no one speaks loudly, they simply prepare to leave. Outside, the light has softened into the early tones of evening, the heat beginning to ease, the air growing more gentle, and the world beyond the school continues in its quiet, steady way. The boy steps out into this softer light, carrying with him the calm weight of the day, the repetition, the stillness, the long hours of careful work that have passed without excitement, without change, yet not without purpose. And as he begins to walk home along the same narrow path, his footsteps slow and even, the village settling into the quieter rhythm of evening, the school day fades behind him, not as a memory filled with moments, but as a single long stretch of calm effort. And tomorrow it will begin again, just as quietly, just as steadily, as if nothing has changed at all.
The path home feels softer in the evening. The ground, which had grown warm under the long presence of the sun, now begins to release that warmth slowly back into the air, and the boy walks along it with steady, unhurried steps, his body still carrying the quiet weight of the day, his hands faintly marked with traces of ink that have settled into the small lines of his skin. The light has changed. It is no longer bright or pressing, but gentle and low, stretching across the land in long, calm shadows that move almost without being noticed, and the sky above holds a pale, fading glow that slowly deepens with each passing moment. Around him, the village shifts into a different kind of stillness, not the silent stillness of early morning, but something softer, something more settled, as if the day itself is beginning to rest. A few voices drift through the air, low and relaxed. The distant sound of footsteps, slower now. The quiet presence of animals returning. The soft movement of water from the Nile continuing its endless flow just beyond sight. The boy does not hurry. There is no reason to. The school day is over, but there is no sudden feeling of freedom, no burst of energy or excitement, only a gradual easing, a slow release from the steady focus that has held him throughout the long hours. His thoughts are quiet, not empty, but simple. He remembers the lines he wrote, the careful shapes of the symbols, the steady voice of the teacher. And these memories do not stand out as separate moments, but blend together into one continuous feeling, like the soft hum of something that never fully stops. As he approaches his home, the familiar shape of the mud brick walls comes into view, their surface now touched by the warm tones of evening light, and he steps inside without pause, moving from the open air into the cooler space within, where the day's heat lingers only faintly. Inside, the atmosphere is calm. There is no loud greeting, no sudden change, only the quiet continuation of life.
A simple meal is prepared, much like the one taken earlier in the day, perhaps a piece of bread, perhaps a small portion of vegetables, something plain and steady, and he sits to eat without urgency, his movements slow, his attention soft. The act of eating feels no different from the act of writing. Both are part of the same rhythm. Both are done without haste, without distraction. The taste is familiar, the texture simple, and when the meal is finished, there is nothing more expected of him, nothing to prepare, nothing to study in the way one might imagine. Because the learning does not continue at home. It remains in the place where it is taught, within the quiet walls of the school, guided by the steady presence of the teacher. So the evening unfolds gently. The boy may step outside again, standing for a while beneath the fading light, watching as the sky shifts slowly into deeper shades, the first signs of night appearing almost without notice. The air cools, the sounds of the village grow softer, and the long day begins to settle into memory, not as a series of events, but as a single calm stretch of time. There is no reflection on what has been learned, no review of mistakes, no anticipation of tomorrow, only the quiet presence of the moment and the steady passage of time moving forward. As darkness begins to gather, the boy returns inside, where the space has grown cooler still, the walls now holding the softness of evening rather than the heat of the day. And he prepares for rest in the same simple way that he prepared for the morning. There are no long rituals, no extended activities, only the quiet transition from wakefulness to sleep. He lowers himself once again onto the woven mat, the same one from the night before, the same place where the next day will begin, and he lies still for a moment, listening to the faint sounds that remain, the distant movement of the night, the quiet breath of the world as it slows. His body feels the tiredness now, not sharp, not overwhelming, but deep and steady, a natural result of the long hours spent in stillness, in focus, in repetition. His eyes close slowly, and the thoughts that once drifted gently through his mind begin to fade, becoming softer, less clear, until they disappear into the calm silence of sleep. Outside, the night settles fully, the sky darkens, the village grows quiet, and time continues, steady and unbroken, carrying everything forward without pause. Morning will come again, the same light, the same path, the same quiet room, the same careful lines written one after another, and the boy will return to it without question, without resistance, because this is the rhythm of his life, as steady as the Nile, as unchanging as the passing of day into night. And somewhere, in the deep stillness between one day and the next, the pattern continues, unseen but constant, waiting to begin again.
Morning returns quietly. There is no sudden beginning, no clear moment when night fully gives way to day, only a gradual softening of darkness as a pale light spreads slowly across the sky, touching the edges of the world with a calm and gentle presence. And inside the small mud-brick home, the boy stirs once more from sleep, his breathing steady, his body still for a few moments as he rests between dreams and waking. The air is cool again, faintly fresh, carrying with it the subtle scent of earth that has rested through the night. And as he opens his eyes, there is a familiar stillness around him, the same quiet space, the same woven mat beneath him, the same beginning that feels almost identical to the one before. There is no need to think about what comes next. It is already known. He sits up slowly, the motions of waking gentle and unhurried, and for a brief moment he simply listens, as if confirming that the world outside continues as it always does, the distant presence of the Nile, the faint stirring of early movement, the soft breath of morning settling into place. Nothing has changed, and in that sameness there is a quiet certainty. He rises and prepares himself in the same simple way, his movements steady, practiced, requiring no decision, no variation, and as the light grows stronger, he gathers his tools once more, the wooden palette, the reeds, the surface for writing, each item held with a quiet familiarity that has already begun to feel permanent. Stepping outside, he is met again by the soft, early light, the sky still pale, the air still gentle, and the path before him stretches out just as it did the day before, narrow and worn, leading through the quiet village toward the place where the long hours will unfold once again. Other children appear as they walk, one by one, not suddenly, not all at once, but gradually, each joining the path in their own time, their presence expected, their silence shared, and together they move forward without hurry, their footsteps forming a slow and steady rhythm against the earth. There is no need for words. The day has already begun. When they reach the school, nothing feels new. The space is the same, the walls unchanged, the arrangement of the room exactly as it was before, as if the passage of time has left no mark upon it at all. They take their places without being told, each movement quiet, deliberate. The tools are set down, the bodies lower into position, and the stillness settles once again. The teacher is there, as always, present, unmoving, watching. There is no greeting, no acknowledgement of a new day, only the continuation of what has already begun. A phrase is spoken, clear, even, and the work resumes. The boy dips his reed into ink, brings it to the surface, and begins to write. The first lines feel familiar, easier than before, not because they are different, but because they are the same, repeated enough times that the hand remembers their shape without needing to search for it. The movements flow more smoothly now, less hesitation, more certainty. And yet the effort remains. It is simply quieter, more contained. Around him, the same soft scratching fills the room, the same steady rhythm of many hands moving together, and the sound blends into the stillness so completely that it feels less like noise and more like a part of the air itself. Time begins its slow passage again, unmarked, unrushed. The boy's mind settles into the work more quickly today, as if it has learned the pattern, as if it understands that there is no need to resist the repetition, no need to look for change where none will come. And so he writes, line after line, symbol after symbol, each one placed with care, each one part of a larger whole that does not reveal itself all at once, but builds slowly, quietly, through steady effort. The teacher moves among the students once more, his presence calm, his steps measured, and when he pauses beside the boy, there is a brief moment of stillness, a quiet awareness that sharpens the boy's focus, guiding his hand to be just a little more precise, just a little more careful. A small correction is given, soft, brief, and then the teacher moves on. Nothing more is said. Nothing more is needed. The lesson continues. As the morning unfolds, the light shifts again, growing brighter, warming the space, and the familiar pattern holds, unchanged, unbroken, a steady flow of repetition that stretches across the hours without interruption. There is no counting of time, no watching of shadows, only the quiet movement of the hand, the steady presence of the teacher, and the calm understanding that this is how the day will pass. And somewhere within that understanding, something deepens. Not excitement,
not interest, but a kind of acceptance, a quiet settling in to the rhythm, as if the boy is becoming part of it just as much as it is shaping him. Outside, the world continues as always. The river moves, the fields wait, the village breathes, and inside, the lines continue to form, one after another, each one nearly identical to the last, each one carrying forward the slow, patient process of learning that defines these long, quiet days. And once again, without any clear moment of change, the morning begins to drift toward the long stretch that follows, the heat rising, the stillness deepening, and the endless repetition continuing, calm and steady, without urgency, without variation.
As the morning slowly deepens, the familiar warmth begins to settle once more into the quiet space of the school. Not all at once, but in a gradual and almost unnoticeable way, as if the air itself is gently thickening, holding the heat of the rising sun and pressing it softly against the still bodies of the students who remain seated in their places, continuing their work without pause. The boy's hand moves steadily. There is less effort in each stroke now, not because the task has become easier in any exciting way, but because repetition has shaped his movements into something more natural, something that flows without needing to be guided so carefully. And yet the focus remains, quiet and constant, like a steady breath that does not draw attention to itself. The lines before him begin to fill the surface, one after another, each symbol placed with care, forming a pattern that feels both simple and endless. And as he reaches the end of one line, he moves to the next without hesitation, without any sense of completion, because there is always another line waiting. Around him, the room remains unchanged, the same stillness, the same soft sound of writing, the same quiet presence of the teacher, who continues to move slowly among the students, pausing from time to time, observing, correcting, guiding with a calm and steady hand. There are moments when the boy's attention drifts again, not far, not fully away, but just enough to notice the small details around him, the way the light now falls more directly across the floor, the way the shadows have shortened, becoming softer, less defined, as the sun rises higher into the sky. He notices the faint movement of air through the open space, a gentle shift that brings with it a hint of dryness, a reminder of the heat that continues to grow outside. But these observations pass quickly. They do not interrupt the rhythm. They simply move through his awareness and fade, like quiet thoughts that leave no lasting mark. The teacher's voice rises again, another phrase, another line to be copied. The words are familiar in their tone, carrying the same calm instruction, the same sense of order and discipline that has been present from the beginning. And the boy listens, then returns to his work, his hand following the pattern without resistance. Time continues to move, slowly, steadily, without change. The sense of duration becomes difficult to notice, as if the hours are no longer separate from one another, but have blended into a single, continuous stretch of calm effort, where the beginning and the middle feel the same, and the end remains distant and undefined. At some point, the quiet pause returns, not announced, not marked, but felt, a slight easing in the teacher's movement, a soft stillness that spreads through the room. The boy sets down his reed for a moment, his fingers relaxing, his hand resting lightly against the surface before him, and he takes a slow breath, not deep, not deliberate, but natural, as if his body is simply adjusting to the brief absence of motion. He looks ahead, not focusing on anything in particular, just allowing his gaze to rest, and in that small moment, the world feels even quieter than before, as if everything has settled into a deeper stillness. But the pause does not last long. It never does.
Soon the teacher speaks again, and the rhythm returns just as gently as it faded, and the boy lifts his reed once more, dips it into the ink, and continues. There is no resistance, no hesitation, only the continuation of what has already been happening. As the day moves forward, the warmth deepens further, settling into the walls, the floor, the air itself, and the boy begins to feel it more clearly now, not as something uncomfortable, but as a steady presence that cannot be ignored, a quiet weight that rests on his skin and in his breath. He shifts slightly again, adjusting his position, and continues to write. The symbols now come with greater ease, the shapes more consistent, the lines more even, and though the work remains the same, there is a subtle sense that something within him is changing, not in a way that feels new or exciting, but in a quiet, almost invisible way, as if the repetition is slowly shaping him from within. The teacher pauses beside him once more. This time there is no correction, only a brief moment of observation, and then a small, almost unnoticeable nod. It is not praise, not encouragement in the way one might expect, but it is enough. The boy continues, his movements steady, his attention calm. Outside, the brightness of the day reaches its peak, the sun high above, the heat fully present, and the world beyond the school moves in its own steady rhythm, unseen, but always there, always continuing. Inside, nothing changes, the same lines, the same symbols, the same quiet effort. And yet the day moves forward. The shadows will shift again, the air will soften, the light will fade. But for now, there is only this moment, this steady, unbroken stretch of time, and the boy, seated in stillness, writing line after line, as the quiet weight of the day carries him slowly onward.
As the day reaches its quiet height, when the sun stands nearly still above the land and the air feels thick with warmth that has nowhere to go, the stillness inside the school becomes even deeper, as if the heat itself has gently pressed everything into place, softening movement, slowing thought, and stretching each moment into something longer than before. The boy continues to write. His hand moves with a calm steadiness that no longer feels forced, each symbol forming with a quiet certainty, the shapes familiar now, repeated so many times that they seem to rise from memory without effort, and yet the act itself remains slow, deliberate, never rushed. The surface before him fills gradually, line after line, a quiet record of time passing, though no one marks it as such. There is no sense of progress in the way one might expect, no clear feeling of moving forward, only the gentle accumulation of work that builds without drawing attention to itself. Around him, the other students remain much the same, their bodies still, their movements measured, each one absorbed in the same task, the same repetition, the same steady rhythm that holds the room together without needing to be spoken. The teacher has taken a seat now, not far from where he stood before, but settled, his posture relaxed yet attentive, his gaze moving slowly across the room, observing without interruption, as if the lesson no longer requires his constant motion, but instead rests in the quiet continuation of what has already been set in place. From time to time, a student is called to recite again. The voice rises gently, careful and controlled, repeating the learned phrases with a steady pace, and the words drift through the room, soft and even, before fading back into the stillness. The boy listens when the voices come. He recognizes the phrases. They are the same ones he has written, the same lines that have passed through his hand again and again, and hearing them spoken aloud feels like another layer of the same repetition, another way of shaping the memory so that it settles more deeply, more permanently. The air is quiet, heavy but calm.
The warmth presses softly against his skin, and he feels it now in a steady, constant way, no longer something that changes, but something that simply is. He shifts slightly, adjusting his position once more, his movements careful and small, and then continues writing, because there is nothing else to do, nothing else expected. Time feels distant, not in the sense that it has stopped, but in the sense that it no longer matters. The hours are not counted, the moments are not marked. There is only the present, stretching gently forward, carrying everything with it in a slow and steady flow. Outside, the world remains unseen, but its presence can still be felt, faint and distant, the soft suggestion of movement, the quiet continuation of life beyond these walls, where the river moves, where the fields rest under the sun, where others go about their own routines. But here, inside, the pattern does not change. The boy reaches the end of another line. He pauses for a brief moment, lifting the reed slightly, his hand hovering, before moving again to begin the next. There is no sense of finishing, only continuation. The teacher's voice returns after a long stretch of silence, another phrase, spoken clearly, without emphasis, without variation. The boy listens, then writes, the same pattern, the same steady rhythm. The work continues as it always does, without interruption, without surprise. At some point, the light begins to soften, so slowly that it is almost impossible to notice at first, but the brightness that once filled the room begins to ease, the edges of shadow returning, stretching gently across the floor once more. The boy senses this change in a quiet way, not as a thought, but as a feeling, a subtle shift in the space around him. And with it comes a faint awareness that the day is moving forward, that the long stretch of stillness is slowly beginning to lean toward its end. But even this change is gentle. There is no sudden relief, no release, only a gradual easing. The teacher stands again, moves slowly through the room. His presence returns to motion, though still calm, still measured. And as he passes each student, there is a quiet acknowledgement of their work, a brief glance, a moment of observation. When he passes the boy, there is no correction, no word, only the same steady attention, and then he moves on. The boy continues writing. The lines now feel longer, not because they have changed, but because the body feels the length of the day more clearly now, the quiet tiredness that has settled into his arms, his back, his legs, the result of so many hours spent in stillness. But he does not stop. He does not rush. He simply continues. As the afternoon deepens, the room begins to feel different, though nothing visible has truly changed, only the light, only the air, only the quiet sense that the day is slowly beginning to close. The boy finishes another line, then another, his movements steady, even as the tiredness remains. And somewhere in that steady effort there is a quiet understanding, not spoken, not fully formed, but present nonetheless, that this day, like the one before and the one before that, will end in the same gentle way it began, without change, without surprise, only fading softly into evening. And so he writes, as the light continues to soften, as the shadows lengthen, as the long, unbroken rhythm of the day carries him quietly forward, toward a close that will come without announcement, just as it always does.
The afternoon begins to lean gently toward evening, though the change comes so slowly that it almost feels imagined, as if the light itself is quietly loosening its hold on the room, softening at the edges, becoming less direct, less present, while the warmth that filled the air throughout the day begins, little by little, to ease. Inside the school, the rhythm remains. It does not break. It does not shift suddenly. It simply continues, as it has from the very beginning,
carried forward by the quiet habits of those within it. The boy writes, his hand still steady, though now touched with a deeper tiredness that rests in his fingers, in his wrist, in the small muscles that have worked without pause for so many hours. He does not think about stopping. There is no thought of how much time remains, only the next line, always the next line. The teacher's voice comes less often now, not because the lesson has ended, but because it no longer needs to be guided so closely, the students already moving within the pattern, already continuing the work with a quiet understanding that requires few words. When the voice does rise, it carries the same calm tone, the same measured pace, offering another phrase, another line to be written, and the boy listens, then follows, his movements unchanged. Around him, the other students remain still, their presence steady, their focus inward. And though they share the same space, there is little sense of togetherness in the way one might expect, only a quiet parallel, each one moving through the same task in their own silent way. The light shifts further, shadows grow longer, they stretch slowly across the floor, reaching toward the far wall, marking the passage of time in a way that feels soft and unhurried. The boy notices this without fully thinking about it, a small awareness, a quiet recognition that the day is beginning to close. But even this brings no change in his movement. He continues, line after line, symbol after symbol. The repetition feels endless, and yet not heavy. It simply exists. The air begins to feel lighter now, not cool yet, but no longer as still as before, as if the heat has begun to lift, releasing its quiet hold on the space. A faint movement of air passes through, barely felt, but present enough to be noticed in the smallest way. The boy shifts once more, adjusting his position, and continues writing, his body responding to the long hours, but his mind remaining calm, steady, without resistance. There is no impatience here, no visible desire for the day to end, only the quiet continuation of what has already been. At some point, the teacher rises again. He moves through the room slowly, his steps soft, his presence steady, and as he passes each student, he looks down at their work, not with urgency, not with judgment, but with a quiet attention that acknowledges the effort without needing to speak. When he pauses near the boy, there is a brief stillness. The boy continues writing. The teacher watches for a moment, then moves on. Nothing is said, nothing needs to be said. The work speaks for itself. The boy reaches the end of another line. He pauses briefly, lifting his hand, feeling the slight ache in his fingers, then lowers it again, beginning the next. The pattern does not break. The day does not rush toward its end. It simply unfolds, slowly, calmly. As the light softens further, the room takes on a different feeling, quieter somehow, though no less still, as if the approaching evening brings with it a deeper calm, a gentle closing of the long stretch of time that has filled the day. The teacher's voice fades into longer silences. The intervals between instruction grow wider, and within those spaces, the students continue on their own, guided by habit, by memory, by the quiet rhythm that has shaped their movements from the start. The boy writes, and writes, and writes, until the lines before him begin to feel less distinct, not because he cannot see them, but because they have become so familiar, so repeated, that they no longer stand apart from one another. They are simply part of the whole, part of the day, part of the quiet effort that has filled every moment. Outside, the brightness of the sun begins to lower, though it cannot yet be seen from within, only felt in the softening of light, the lengthening of shadow, the gentle shift in the air. And inside, without announcement, without signal, the work begins to slow, not in movement, but in feeling, as if the day itself is beginning to exhale. The boy completes another line, then one more,
and though he does not yet stop, there is a quiet sense, deep and unspoken, that the end is near, that the long, steady rhythm will soon ease, not suddenly, not sharply, but in the same gentle way that it began. And so he continues, calm and unhurried, his hand moving across the surface in careful strokes as the final stretch of the day unfolds slowly around him, carrying him toward a close that will arrive as softly as everything else has.
As the day moves into its final stretch, the light inside the school becomes softer still, no longer pressing strongly through the open spaces, but instead settling into a calm, muted glow that seems to rest gently over everything it touches, as if the world itself is slowly lowering its voice. The boy continues to write, but now there is a subtle change in the feeling of the work, not in what is being done, but in the way it feels to do it, as if the long repetition of the day is beginning to loosen its hold, allowing a quiet sense of nearing completion to settle in without needing to be spoken. His hand still moves, careful, steady, but the effort feels slightly different now, not lighter exactly, but more familiar, as though the act of writing has been carried so far that it no longer feels like a task being performed, but rather something already deeply understood, something that no longer needs thought. Around him, the other students seem to feel it too, though no one shows it openly. There is still silence, still focus, still the steady scratching of reeds against surface. But beneath it all, there is a shared awareness that the long stretch of the day is gently approaching its end. The teacher stands again. His movement is unhurried, as always, but there is a subtle change in his presence, a quiet easing as he walks between the rows of students, observing the final lines being written, as if ensuring that the day is being brought to completion in the same steady manner in which it began. He pauses occasionally, not to correct, not to instruct, but simply to look, to acknowledge, to witness the final part of the work. The boy keeps writing, his eyes focused on the surface before him, his hand moving almost automatically now, guided by repetition more than conscious thought, as if the symbols themselves are already familiar enough to guide their own formation. The room feels different in these moments, quieter in a deeper way, not because the sound has changed, but because the meaning of the sound has softened, as if it is no longer carrying instruction, but simply continuing out of habit, out of completion. The light along the floor stretches further, the shadows grow longer still. They reach the far edges of the room and begin to rest there, unmoving, as if they too are waiting for the day to end. The boy finishes another line, then pauses, not fully stopping, but resting for a moment longer than before, his hand hovering slightly above the surface, his fingers loosening just a little, as if acknowledging the quiet fatigue that has been building gently throughout the hours. He breathes slowly, calmly, and then continues. The teacher's voice does not return as often now. When it does, it is brief, simple, a final phrase, a final reminder. And each time it feels less like instruction and more like closure, as if the structure of the day is gently folding back into itself. The boy listens, writes, and continues. But something in the rhythm is beginning to settle, not stopping, not ending yet, but easing. Outside, the world beyond the walls is now clearly in late afternoon light, though only its softness reaches inside, a gentle sense that the sun is lowering, that the day is slowly releasing its hold on the land. Inside, the students remain seated, still working, still focused, but their movements are quieter now, more measured, as if each one understands without being told that the final moments of effort should be carried with care. The boy's hand moves across the surface again, and then again, until finally, after what feels like both a long time and a short one, the teacher speaks one last time. There is no announcement, no formal ending, only a calm, steady pause in the rhythm that had held the room together all day. And then the work stops, not suddenly, but softly, like a breath released. The boy sets down his reed, slowly, carefully, his hand resting for a moment against the surface before he moves it away, as if confirming that the day's work is truly complete. Around him, the others do the same. No words are spoken, no sounds of excitement follow, only the quiet motion of gathering tools, placing them where they belong, returning each item to its simple order, as though even the ending of the day must follow its own careful structure. The boy rises. His body feels the weight of the long hours now, not sharply, but deeply, in a way that is calm and familiar, and he stands there for a moment before turning to leave. The teacher remains seated, still, watching, and then, slowly, the students begin to walk out, one by one, into the softened light of the late day. The boy steps outside. The air feels different immediately, gentler, cooler, the heat of the day now fading into memory rather than presence, and the sky above has begun to shift into the early colors of evening, soft and wide and quiet. He begins the walk home again, the same path, the same movement, but now it feels lighter, not because anything has changed, but because the day that held so much repetition is now behind him. The village around him is calm, resting, moving slowly into evening life. And as he walks, the school fades behind him not as something dramatic or memorable, but as something steady and ordinary, a long stretch of quiet work that has now come to its natural end. And in that fading, there is only calm, only stillness, only the soft, unhurried arrival of night.
Evening settles more deeply now, not suddenly, but in the same slow and patient way that everything else has unfolded, as if the entire world prefers to change without being noticed, and the boy walks through this gentle shift with steady steps, his body still carrying the memory of the long day, though the weight of it now feels distant, softened by the cooling air and the quiet rhythm of returning home. The path beneath him is familiar. Every small turn, every narrow stretch of ground, every quiet bend between simple homes built of earth and sun-dried brick, all of it known so well that he does not need to look carefully where he steps, and so his eyes drift slightly, resting not on anything in particular, but on the calm surroundings that begin to fade into evening light. There is a softness in the air now that was not there before, a gentle release, as if the day is exhaling its final breath. Around him, the village moves in slow fragments of life, people returning from work, voices low and unhurried, doors opening and closing without urgency, and even the sounds themselves feel reduced, as though everything has agreed to become quieter together. The boy continues walking, not thinking ahead, not thinking back, only moving forward in a steady, simple rhythm. The school day no longer feels immediate. It has already begun to settle into memory, not as a series of events, but as one long, continuous experience of stillness and repetition, where time was not counted, but simply endured, gently, calmly, without resistance. As he approaches his home, the familiar shape becomes clearer in the dimming light, the same quiet structure that has stood through so many mornings and evenings, holding the rhythm of daily life within its simple walls.
He steps inside. The air within is cooler now, holding the faint trace of the day's warmth, but already easing into night, and there is no need for words, no need for explanation, only the quiet understanding that the day is done. A small meal is prepared, simple and familiar, and he eats slowly, without thought of anything beyond the moment, his movements relaxed, his body finally allowed to settle after the long hours of stillness and writing. There is no study here, no lesson, no expectation, only rest. Outside, the last light of the sun fades, leaving behind a sky that grows deeper and softer with every passing moment, and the boy, finished with his meal, sits quietly for a while, simply existing in the calm of the evening. The sounds of the village diminish further, not silence, but something close to it, a quiet presence that feels steady and complete. He does not think about tomorrow. There is no need to imagine it. It will arrive as all days do, in the same gentle way, with the same path, the same school, the same careful repetition of lines written slowly and steadily under the watchful calm of the teacher. And this understanding does not feel heavy. It feels natural, like something that has always been true. When he finally lies down, the mat beneath him is familiar, shaped by countless nights of the same rest, and as his body relaxes into it, the tiredness of the day settles fully, not sharply, but deeply, like a soft closing of everything that has been held in motion. His eyes grow heavy. The sounds of the night are faint and distant. The air cools gently around him, and there is nothing left to hold his attention, only the slow sinking into sleep, only the quiet return to stillness. Outside, the Nile continues its steady movement, unchanged and unhurried, carrying the land through night just as it carries it through day. And within the small home, the boy rests in that same unbroken rhythm, where nothing is urgent, nothing is sudden, and everything moves as it always has. And so the day ends, not with a final moment, but with a fading, a gentle softening of light, of sound, of thought, until there is only night, and the promise of another morning arriving the same way it always does, quietly, slowly, and without anything needing to change.
Night does not arrive all at once. It comes in layers, soft and gradual, as if the sky itself prefers to dim slowly rather than change too quickly. And in that slow fading, the world becomes quieter in a way that feels almost natural, almost expected, as though it has always known how to become still at the end of a long day. Inside the small home, the boy sleeps. His breathing is steady, unbroken, and his body rests without tension, as if it has fully accepted the rhythm of the life it follows, moving through each day of writing, walking, and waiting, and then returning again to this same quiet rest. The air around him is cool now, gentle, and the faint sounds of the village have nearly disappeared, leaving only the distant presence of night itself, a soft atmosphere that holds everything in place without needing to be noticed. Somewhere far beyond the walls of the home, the Nile continues its slow passage. It does not change with the hours. It does not rush. It does not pause. It simply moves, as it always has, carrying the land beside it through the quiet of darkness, just as it carries it through the brightness of day. And in the stillness of this movement, there is a kind of calm that touches everything. The boy does not dream of anything sharp or bright. His sleep is deep and even, shaped by the long repetition of his days, where nothing unexpected interrupts the flow of time, and where each morning follows the same gentle path into work, into silence, into writing. Hours pass without marking themselves, not felt, not counted, only existing as part of the larger quiet that holds the night together. And then, slowly, without urgency, the first suggestion of morning begins again. Not yet light, not yet sound, only a faint shift in the air, a subtle easing of darkness that signals the return of another day, as though the world has never truly stopped, but only rested for a moment before continuing its familiar rhythm. The boy stirs, not awake yet, not fully aware, only moving slightly within sleep, as the body prepares itself for the same beginning it has known so many times before. And outside, the sky begins its slow transition once more, the darkness loosening gently at the edges, giving way to the soft promise of another pale dawn. There is no change in this pattern, no variation, only the same return, the same quiet unfolding, the same gentle rhythm that holds everything in place. And somewhere within that endless repetition, the life of a young student in ancient Egypt continues, steady and unbroken, carried forward not by moments of excitement, but by the calm and ordinary passage of time itself. Morning returns again, in the same quiet way it always does, without urgency, without announcement, as if the world has never truly left its stillness, but only shifted slightly within it, and the pale light of dawn begins to spread slowly across the sky, touching the edges of the village, the river, and the simple shapes of homes that rest so calmly beneath it. Inside the small home, the boy wakes. Not suddenly, not sharply, but gradually, as though the boundary between sleep and waking is something soft and unhurried, and for a few moments he simply lies still, breathing gently, listening to the faint presence of morning forming around him. The air is cool again, familiar, carrying that same quiet sense of beginning that has already been felt so many times before. He sits up slowly, his movements unremarkable, his body already knowing what it must do before he even thinks it, and there is no hesitation, no uncertainty, only the calm repetition of a life that follows the same pattern day after day. Outside, the light strengthens. It does not rush, it does not change abruptly. It simply grows, filling the sky in soft layers, and with it comes the gentle return of the world beyond the home, the faint sounds of movement in the village, the quiet suggestion of another day beginning in its usual way. The boy prepares himself, the same motions, the same tools, the same quiet arrangement of simple things that have already become part of him through repetition, and as he gathers them, there is no sense of surprise in the act, only familiarity, as if everything has already been decided long before the moment arrives. He steps outside. The path is waiting. The village is already awake in its slow, steady way, and the other children begin to appear again, one by one, joining the same direction of movement, their footsteps blending into a soft rhythm that carries them forward without effort, without conversation, without anything needing to be said. The school is still there, unchanged, waiting in its quiet stillness as it always is. The boy arrives, takes his place, and the day begins once more in the same gentle pattern, with the teacher present, the tools arranged, and the familiar phrase spoken in a calm, even voice that signals the start of writing. The reed touches the surface, ink meets material, and the lines begin again, one after another, slow, steady, unbroken. The boy writes without resistance, his hand already accustomed to the shapes, his mind already settled into the rhythm, and around him the same soft scratching fills the room, the same shared silence, the same unchanging structure of learning that asks only for patience and repetition. Time moves forward,
though it is not felt as movement, only as continuation. The day does not announce itself, it simply unfolds, and in that unfolding, the boy remains seated, calm and focused, as the familiar cycle begins once again, carrying him gently into another long stretch of quiet work, where nothing is rushed, nothing is interrupted, and everything continues exactly as it has before.
As the new day settles into its early rhythm, there is a quiet sense of familiarity that fills the schoolroom, as if nothing here ever truly begins or ends, but only continues in a long, unbroken thread that stretches backward and forward without clear edges, and the boy, seated once again on the simple floor, feels himself gently placed back into that rhythm without effort or resistance. The teacher speaks, not loudly, not sharply, just clearly enough for the words to carry across the still space. Another line to be written, another phrase to be remembered, and the boy lowers his gaze, dipping the reed into ink with the same careful motion he has repeated so many times that it no longer feels like learning how to do it, but simply doing it, as natural as breathing in the quiet of the room. The surface in front of him receives each mark without change, without reaction, holding the symbols in place as they appear, one after another, forming lines that look almost identical to the ones written yesterday and the day before that and the day before that again. Around him, the other students continue in the same way, still, focused, silent, each one absorbed in their own slow repetition, yet all connected by the same shared task, the same steady pace, the same quiet understanding that nothing here will move quickly or unexpectedly. The sound of writing remains soft and constant, like a gentle background rhythm that never fully stops, and within that rhythm, time passes in a way that feels smooth and uninterrupted, without clear divisions or moments that stand apart from one another. The boy adjusts his posture slightly, a small movement, almost unnoticeable. His hand continues without pause, even as his body shifts to ease the quiet strain that builds from long stillness, and the change is so slight that it does not disturb the flow of the work at all. The teacher walks again between the rows, slow steps, measured presence, his shadow passing over the floor in a calm, familiar pattern, and as he moves, there is no tension in the room, only a quiet awareness that he is there, observing the steady continuation of the lesson. When he pauses, it is brief, a glance at a page, a moment of silent evaluation. Then he moves on. No words are needed. The boy continues writing, line after line. The repetition is not something he questions anymore. It has become part of the structure of the day, like the rising of the sun or the cooling of the evening air, something expected, something reliable, something that simply is. Outside, the world carries on in its own slow flow. The river moves, the wind shifts gently across open land, the village exists in its quiet continuity. But here, within the walls of the school, all of that feels distant, softened, as if separated by a layer of stillness that makes the room feel like its own small, contained world. The boy finishes another line, then begins the next without pause. His hand moves with steady confidence now, shaped by repetition more than instruction, and the act itself becomes almost thoughtless, yet still careful, still controlled, still precise. Time continues its slow passage, unmarked, uncounted, only felt in subtle changes of light, in the slight shift of warmth, in the quiet endurance of sitting, writing, repeating. And so the day stretches forward once again, calm and unchanging, carrying the boy gently through its long and quiet hours, where nothing interrupts the rhythm and everything remains as it has always been, steady, simple, and endlessly familiar. As the hours continue their quiet passage, the room grows softer in feeling, not because anything has changed in a clear or visible way, but because the body and mind of the boy begin to settle more deeply into the rhythm of the day, as if they are no longer resisting the repetition, but moving with it, gently, almost without noticing. The light shifts again, slowly, almost imperceptibly. It is still morning, yet it feels different from the morning that began the day, as though time itself has quietly moved forward without asking for attention. The boy keeps writing. His hand no longer hesitates. Each symbol appears with a quiet certainty, formed through repetition so many times that the movement feels almost automatic, yet still carefully controlled, as if the habit has grown so strong that it now guides him as much as he guides it. Around him, the other students remain in their places, unchanged in posture, unchanged in focus, each one continuing their own steady work within the same silent structure that holds them all together. The teacher stands at the front again, still, observing. His presence is calm, steady, almost unchanging, like a fixed point in the room around which everything else quietly moves. When he speaks, it is only to guide the next step, the next line, the next phrase, and then silence returns, filling the space once more with the soft sound of writing. The boy dips his reed again. Ink touches surface. Another line begins. And in that simple act, there is no anticipation, no expectation beyond the immediate moment, only the continuation of something already long in motion. Time does not feel like something that moves forward in steps. It feels like something that flows evenly, without edges, without breaks, without anything to mark where one moment ends and another begins. The boy shifts slightly again, easing the quiet stiffness in his shoulders, but his attention remains steady, anchored in the repetition of the task, in the familiar shapes forming under his hand. The room itself feels unchanged, the same quiet order, the same careful discipline, the same gentle absence of noise beyond the work itself. And yet within that stillness there is a subtle sense of continuation, as if the day is slowly unfolding further into itself, carrying everything along with it in a smooth, unbroken line. The teacher moves once more between the rows, no urgency, no interruption, just presence, just observation. The boy does not look up. He does not need to. The rhythm of the work is enough to hold him in place, enough to guide his attention, enough to keep him moving forward, line after line. Outside, the world remains distant, almost imagined, existing beyond the walls as something separate and slow, while inside, the repetition continues, calm and steady, filling every moment with the same quiet action. And as the light continues its gradual shift and the day moves forward without announcement or change, the boy remains seated, writing, repeating, continuing, as if the entire world has narrowed itself into this single, gentle rhythm that never seems to end.
As the day continues without interruption, there is a deeper sense of calm that settles into the room, not as something noticeable or sudden, but as a slow and steady acceptance of the rhythm that has already been in place since the first light of morning. And the boy remains seated in that rhythm, his body still, his hand moving with quiet precision, as if the act of writing has become the only natural way to pass through time. The repetition continues, line after line, symbol after symbol, each one forming in the same careful manner as the last, each one placed with the same steady attention that has been present from the beginning of the day. And though the task does not change, it no longer feels heavy in the same way it once might have, because it has become familiar, almost expected, like the soft passing of wind through still air. The teacher remains at the front of the room, silent for a time, then speaking again in brief, measured phrases. Each instruction is simple, each phrase already known in some way, either from earlier in the day or from countless days before, and so the words do not introduce anything new, so much as they gently reinforce what has already been learned through repetition. The boy listens when needed and writes when required, the two actions blending into one continuous motion that carries him through the quiet hours. Around him, the other students remain equally steady, no visible change in posture, no sign of impatience, only the soft, unbroken continuation of effort, as if everyone in the room has quietly agreed to exist within this slow and structured passage of time. The light shifts once more. It is still bright, but no longer at its strongest point. There is a subtle easing in its tone, a slight softness at the edges of shadows that suggests the day is slowly moving forward, though still far from its end. The boy adjusts his position again, not because he needs to, but because the body naturally responds to long stillness, and even this small movement feels calm, almost routine, blending into the overall quiet of the room. His hand continues to move. The reed meets the surface. Ink flows in small, controlled lines, and each completed phrase leads directly into the next, without pause, without separation. Time in this space feels less like something passing and more like something being gently carried, as if the entire room is moving forward together within the same slow current. The teacher walks again. His steps are soft, measured. He pauses briefly behind a student, then moves on, offering no interruption to the flow of work, only presence, only quiet oversight that reinforces the stillness rather than breaking it. The boy does not look up. There is no need. Everything is already understood in its place. And so the writing continues, line after line, day after day, compressed into a single continuous feeling of steady repetition that neither rises nor falls, but simply remains. Outside, the world continues in its own quiet existence, distant and unchanged, while inside, the school holds its own small universe of calm discipline, where nothing rushes, nothing shifts abruptly, and everything moves forward in the same gentle, unbroken rhythm that has shaped the entire day from its beginning.
As the afternoon leans more firmly toward its later hours, there is a subtle change in the atmosphere of the room, not a change that calls attention to itself, but one that is felt in the smallest, quietest way, like a soft easing in the weight of time, as if the long stretch of the day is beginning, almost imperceptibly, to prepare itself for closure. The boy continues to write. His movements remain steady, but there is now a deeper sense of familiarity in every action, as though his body no longer needs to think through the process at all, and instead simply follows a pattern that has been repeated so many times it has become second nature. The reed touches the surface, ink flows, lines appear, and each line leads into the next without hesitation, without pause, without interruption. The teacher's voice is less frequent now. When it comes, it is brief, almost gentle in its finality, offering only what is necessary, as if even speech itself is beginning to slow in preparation for the end of the day. The boy listens when needed, but his attention remains mostly on the work in front of him, where the same symbols continue to form, unchanged in shape, unchanged in meaning, repeated again and again in a rhythm that has carried him through the entire day. Around him, the other students are in the same state of quiet continuation. No one speaks, no one shifts in any noticeable way, only the steady presence of writing, the soft sound of reeds moving across surfaces, filling the room with a gentle and consistent rhythm that seems to belong more to the air itself than to any individual movement. The light has changed again. It is softer now, slightly lower, casting longer shadows that rest more fully across the floor, no longer sharp or bright, but calm and stretched, as if the room itself is slowly extending toward evening. The boy feels this shift without needing to think about it, a quiet awareness, a subtle understanding that the day is moving forward, not quickly, not abruptly, but in the same slow, continuous way it has always moved. He adjusts his posture once more, a small natural correction that brings brief relief to the tiredness building gently in his back and shoulders, and then he continues writing without breaking rhythm, line after line. The repetition continues, but now it feels slightly different, not because the task has changed, but because the mind begins to sense the nearness of completion, even if no one has spoken of it yet. The teacher rises again, walks slowly between the rows, observing, watching. There is no urgency in his movement, only a calm awareness of what is already nearing its natural end. And as he passes each student, his presence feels like a quiet acknowledgement of the effort that has filled the day. When he passes the boy, there is still no correction, only a brief glance, a moment of silent recognition, and then he moves on. The boy continues, his hand now moving with the ease of habit more than effort, as if the repetition itself has carried him beyond the need to consciously guide each stroke. Outside, the light continues its gentle descent, not yet evening, but no longer midday, holding that in-between softness that makes everything feel quieter, more settled, more still. And within the room, the rhythm continues to slow, not in action, but in feeling, as if the entire day is quietly preparing to close itself, just as it always has, just as it always will, without announcement, without change, only the gradual fading of effort into rest.
The final stretch of the day arrives in a way that is almost unnoticeable, not marked by any clear moment or spoken signal, but felt instead as a gentle softening in everything at once, as if the entire room has slowly begun to release its hold on time, allowing the hours to settle into stillness. The boy continues to write. But now each movement carries the quiet awareness that the day is nearing its natural end, even if nothing has been said aloud to confirm it. And this awareness does not create excitement or relief, but only a calm sense of continuation, as if everything is simply moving toward a familiar place it has already visited many times before. His hand remains steady. The reed touches the surface with the same careful precision as always. Ink forms lines. Lines become structure, and structure becomes repetition, flowing forward without interruption. Around him, the room feels slightly different now, not in shape or sound, but in atmosphere. The same silence remains, but it feels deeper, more settled, as if even the air itself has slowed in preparation for the end of the day. The teacher stands at the front, still present, still observing, but there is a quietness in his posture that reflects the same subtle shift felt throughout the room. When he speaks now, it is only to complete what has already been set in motion. Brief phrases, final instructions, nothing new, only closure within the same steady rhythm. The boy listens when needed, then returns to writing, his focus no longer strained, but calm, almost effortless, as though the repetition has carried him beyond conscious effort into something automatic and steady. The light in the room has grown noticeably softer. Shadows stretch further now, resting across the floor in long, gentle shapes that remain still as the day slowly lowers itself toward evening. Everything feels slightly quieter, even though no sound has truly changed. It is the quality of attention that has shifted, the sense that the day is no longer expanding forward, but gently drawing itself inward. The boy completes another line, then another, and there is no urgency in the motion, only the continuation of habit, of rhythm, of a structure that has held him since morning. The teacher moves once more between the rows, slower now, his presence calm and steady, as if walking through the final moments of a process that is already understood by everyone in the room. There are no corrections, no interruptions, only observation, only quiet presence. The boy does not look up. He continues writing. And yet, somewhere within him, there is a subtle recognition that the work is nearing its end, not because of anything visible, but because of the way everything feels slightly lighter, slightly more open, as if the structure of the day is loosening its final hold. Outside, the sky has begun to shift more clearly into evening tones, though still distant and unseen directly, only reflected in the softness of light that filters into the room. The world beyond the walls continues its calm movement, but here, inside, everything feels focused, contained, gently narrowing toward completion. The boy finishes another symbol, pauses for the briefest moment, then continues. There is nothing else to do but continue until the moment of stopping arrives on its own, just as it always does, without announcement, without sudden change. And so the rhythm holds, steady, calm, familiar, as the final part of the day slowly gathers itself together, drawing everything toward its quiet conclusion, where writing will cease, tools will be set down, and the stillness of evening will once again take over with the same gentle certainty it always has.
The final moments of work settle into the room like a soft, slow wave, not arriving suddenly, but spreading gently through everything at once, as if the day itself has grown tired in its own quiet way and has begun to ease its grip on the space it has filled for so long. The boy continues to write, but now there is a different quality to the repetition, something calmer, something almost complete, as if each line carries a sense of finality within it, even though no final line has been announced. His hand moves with steady familiarity. The reed touches the surface, ink forms its familiar marks, and each symbol appears as naturally as breath, shaped not by effort, but by habit refined through countless repetitions across countless hours. The teacher stands at the front, still present, still watching, but now with less movement, less instruction, as if his role has gently shifted from guiding the work to simply witnessing its completion. The room remains silent, not tense, not heavy, but calm in a deeper way than before, a silence that feels settled, as though everything has found its place for the day and is no longer searching for anything beyond it. The boy completes another line, then another, and with each one the surface before him grows closer to being finished, though there is no sense of urgency in reaching that point, only the quiet continuation of what has already been ongoing for so long that it feels endless and natural. The light in the room softens further. It is no longer bright in any strong sense, but gently dim, carrying the warm tones of late afternoon that begin to blur the edges of everything they touch, making the room feel softer, quieter, more distant from the sharpness of earlier hours. The teacher moves again, slowly, almost without sound, passing behind the students like a steady presence that no longer interrupts the rhythm, but simply flows alongside it. When he stops near the boy, there is only a brief pause, a look, a moment of quiet attention, and then he continues on. No words are spoken, none are needed. The boy keeps writing. But now there is a subtle awareness growing within the repetition itself, a quiet understanding that the end is not far, that the long stream of writing is beginning to narrow, that soon the reed will be set down and the day will be complete.
Outside, the sky has shifted further into evening tones, though still distant from full night, carrying a softness that filters into the room like a gentle reminder that the world beyond these walls is also easing into rest. The village continues its slow movement, but even that feels reduced now, softened, as if everything is preparing to pause in its own way. Inside, the boy finishes another line, then rests for the smallest moment, not stopping fully, just pausing. And in that pause, there is a quiet stillness that feels deeper than the writing itself, as if the entire day is holding its breath for just a moment longer. Then he continues again, one more line, then another. The rhythm is nearly complete now, though no one announces it, no one marks it, and yet everyone feels it in their own quiet way. The teacher's voice does not return, only silence remains, a full, steady silence that fills the space between movements, between thoughts, between the final strokes of ink as they are placed carefully onto the surface. And then, slowly, almost without distinction, the writing begins to reach its natural end, not abruptly, not sharply, but like a soft settling, a gentle completion that arrives without needing to be called. The boy lowers his reed, and this time he does not immediately begin another line. He simply holds still for a moment. The work is complete. Around him, the others do the same. No announcement follows, no celebration, only the quiet understanding that the day has reached its end in the same calm way it began. The boy remains seated for a brief moment longer, feeling the stillness fully return, before gathering his tools with slow, careful movements, as if even the act of ending must be done gently. And as he rises, the room begins to open outward into evening once again, carrying him and everyone else toward the soft release of the day.
The transition from work to rest happens so quietly that it almost feels like nothing has changed at all, as if the day simply loosened its structure rather than truly ending, and the boy, now standing with his tools carefully gathered, feels this change not as a moment of departure, but as a gentle shift in the weight of the world around him. There is no rush, no crowding, no sudden movement, only the slow, orderly rising of students from their places, each one following the same familiar sequence, as though even the act of leaving has its own quiet rhythm, practiced and known without needing instruction. The boy holds his writing tools for a moment longer, feeling their simple presence in his hands, the smooth wood of the palette, the lightness of the reeds, the quiet reminder of the long hours they have accompanied him through. And then he places them away with care, returning each item to its proper place as he has been taught to do. Around him, the room remains calm, still. The teacher stands as always, watching, but now without any further instruction, as if his role too has softened into silence, becoming part of the closing atmosphere rather than the structure of the lesson. No one speaks, not yet. The boy turns slowly, adjusting his posture after so many hours of stillness, and he feels the quiet stiffness in his body, not painful, but present, like a reminder of the long, uninterrupted focus that has defined the day. He begins to walk with the others, step by step, out of the school space. The movement is unhurried, natural, and the group forms again without effort, not as something organized, but as something that simply happens, as students leave together in the same direction they arrived, bound by the same routine, the same path, the same quiet understanding of what comes next. Outside, the air has changed once more.
The warmth of the day has softened into a gentle coolness, and the sky has deepened into richer tones of evening, where light and shadow blend together in a way that feels calm and unbroken. The boy steps into it without hesitation. The village around him moves in its slow return to evening life, people walking, doors opening, faint sounds drifting through the air, all of it low and steady, without urgency or disturbance. He walks home, the same path, the same direction. And yet, in this moment, it feels slightly different, not because the path has changed, but because the day behind him has reached its end, leaving behind a quiet emptiness where hours of repetition once filled every moment. There is no reflection in any active sense, no attempt to analyze the day, only the quiet awareness that it has passed, and that tomorrow will be the same. The boy arrives home as the last light begins to fade more clearly, the walls of the small home now holding the soft glow of evening, and he steps inside, where the atmosphere is calm and familiar, already waiting for the night to settle in fully. A simple meal is shared again, without conversation that demands attention, only the quiet act of eating, of resting, of allowing the body to slow after the long stillness of writing. The world outside continues to dim. The sounds become fewer, the air grows cooler, and the boy, once again, feels the natural easing of the day into its final form. There is nothing left to do, nothing expected, only the gentle movement toward rest. He lies down as before, the woven mat familiar beneath him, the same place he has returned to each night, and his body settles into it with ease, as if remembering how to let go of the day without needing to think about it. His eyes grow heavy, thoughts soften, and the last awareness he holds is not of the school, not of the writing, not of the repetition, but of the quiet certainty that everything will begin again in the same calm way it always has. And then, slowly, he lets go. The night deepens, and the story rests there in stillness.
Night settles once more over the land, not as an event, but as a quiet continuation of the same gentle rhythm that has always been present beneath everything. And in that deepening stillness, the world feels as if it has returned to a familiar resting place, where nothing needs to be held, nothing needs to be guided, and nothing needs to change. The boy sleeps. His breathing is soft and even, and his body lies still in the simple comfort of rest, carrying no urgency, no expectation, only the natural weight of a day that has already been lived and set aside. Around him, the night holds everything in a calm and steady silence. The village is quiet. The homes are still, and the river continues its unseen movement beyond the edges of sleep, flowing as it always does, without beginning or end, without interruption, without concern for the passing of days. Time does not feel like something that moves forward here. It feels like something that simply exists, gently unfolding in the background of all things, never demanding attention, never breaking its own flow. And within that flow, the boy rests, as before, as always. There is no difference between this night and the last in any meaningful way that can be felt. Only continuity, only repetition, only the soft continuation of life, as steady as the river, as quiet as the sand, as calm as the fading light that always returns.
Morning arrives again, not as a sharp beginning, but as a slow and gentle unfolding, where darkness loosens its hold in quiet stages and allows a pale softness to spread across the sky, touching the world with a calm light that feels almost familiar before it is even fully seen. Inside the small home, the boy stirs. The movement is slight at first, as if he is still held gently by sleep, and for a few moments there is no clear boundary between dreaming and waking, only a soft awareness returning in pieces, slowly gathering itself into the present. The air is cool, still, and the quiet of the early morning feels unchanged from every other morning before it, as though time itself has no interest in marking difference between one day and the next. He opens his eyes, lies still, listens. There is nothing new in the sounds around him, only the faint presence of life beginning again in its usual, unhurried way. And so he sits up, slowly, naturally, as if the motion has already been decided long before he became aware of it. The same routine follows, the same simple preparation, the same familiar gathering of tools that have accompanied him through so many identical mornings that they no longer feel like separate actions, but part of one continuous pattern that stretches across all days. Outside, the light continues to grow, soft at first, then steadier, then clearer, and the village begins to reveal itself again in calm detail, as it always does, without surprise, without change, simply returning to visibility under the gentle pressure of dawn. The boy steps outside. The path is already there, waiting in its quiet, unchanged form. Other children appear along it, as they always do, joining without need for words or signals, forming the same slow movement toward the school that has become as natural as the rising of the sun itself. There is no conversation that stands out, no moment of excitement, only the steady walking, the soft rhythm of feet against earth, the shared direction of a routine that requires no instruction. The school stands as it always has, simple, still, unchanging, and when the boy enters, there is no sense of arrival into something new, only a continuation of what has already begun in previous days, as if the space itself has never truly been absent from him. He takes his place, sets down his tools, waits in quiet stillness. The teacher is already present, and without pause, without ceremony, the familiar phrase is spoken once more, beginning the day again in the same calm tone that has marked every other beginning before it. The reed meets the surface, ink forms its slow and careful lines, and the boy writes, as he always does, without resistance, without urgency, without anything needing to change. The room settles into its steady rhythm once again, filled with the soft sound of repetition, the gentle presence of still bodies at work, and the quiet understanding that this is how the day will pass, just as the last one did, and the one before that, and all those that came before them. Nothing breaks the flow, nothing interrupts the stillness, only the calm continuation of writing, learning, and repeating as time moves forward in a way that feels less like movement and more like gentle existence. The morning settles deeper into itself as the hours pass, not with any clear turning point, but through a slow and steady thickening of quiet routine, where every movement inside the school becomes part of a familiar pattern that no longer feels separate from time, but gently woven into it. The boy writes. His hand moves with a calm certainty now, shaped by repetition that has softened every hesitation, every small uncertainty that once existed in the earliest days of learning, until even the act of forming symbols feels less like effort and more like continuation. Each line appears the same as the last, measured, controlled, unchanging, and yet within that sameness there is a quiet persistence, a steady accumulation of work that builds without drawing attention to itself, as if the day is not made of moments, but of layers of repetition placed gently one upon another. Around him, the room remains still. The other students are absorbed in their own writing, their movements small and precise, their focus steady and inward, as if each one exists within a slightly separate version of the same calm world. The teacher moves occasionally, slowly, without urgency. His presence passes through the room like a quiet reminder of order, not disrupting the rhythm, but reinforcing it in silence. When he pauses, it is only for a moment, a glance, a brief observation. Then he continues on. No interruption lingers. The boy continues writing. The reed touches the surface again and again, and the sound of it blends into the room so completely that it feels less like noise and more like part of the air itself, a soft and constant background to everything else. Time continues forward, though it is no longer felt in clear divisions. There is no strong sense of morning moving toward midday, only a gradual shift in light, a gentle change in the way shadows rest across the floor, a soft easing in the atmosphere that suggests the day is continuing without needing to be measured. The boy adjusts his posture slightly, a small movement, almost invisible, just enough to ease the quiet strain that builds from long stillness. And then he returns to the page, line after line, symbol after symbol, each one familiar, each one repeated, each one part of a structure that remains unchanged. Outside, the world carries on in its distant way, but here, inside the school, everything feels contained, as if the room itself has become its own small universe where nothing enters except repetition and calm focus. The teacher speaks again, briefly, a phrase that has been spoken many times before. The boy listens, then writes it down, just as he always does, and the rhythm continues without interruption, without variation, without anything that would break the gentle flow of the day. The light shifts again, slightly lower, softer at the edges, but still steady, still calm, still carrying the same quiet atmosphere that has filled every part of the morning so far. And so the writing continues, not rushing, not ending, only moving forward in the same slow and steady manner, as if the day itself has no desire to become anything different than what it already is, a long, peaceful stretch of repetition, carried gently from one moment into the next.
As the day moves forward in its unbroken calm, there comes a point where even the sense of passing time begins to soften, as if the hours are no longer being counted or noticed, but simply experienced as one continuous flow of quiet effort and stillness. The boy continues to write. His movements remain steady, but there is a deeper ease in them now, something that comes not from rest, but from familiarity so complete that the body no longer needs to think before acting, and instead follows the rhythm of repetition as naturally as water follows the shape of the land. The reed touches the surface, ink forms lines, lines become structure, and structure becomes a steady, unchanging pattern that fills the space before him without interruption. Around him, the room holds its same quiet formation, students seated, heads lowered, hands moving in small, controlled motions that mirror one another in silent agreement, each person absorbed in the same task without needing to look beyond it. The teacher stands at a distance now, still present, still observant, but less active in movement, as if the lesson no longer requires direction, only quiet supervision, only the steady maintenance of a rhythm already firmly established. From time to time, a phrase is spoken, always calm, always measured, and always familiar
as if the words themselves belong to the space as much as the walls or the light that falls across the floor. The boy listens when needed, then returns to writing. There is no separation between instruction and action anymore. Everything blends into a single continuous motion that carries him through the hours without resistance. The light shifts again, though gently, without drawing attention to itself. It softens at the edges. It lowers slightly. Not enough to signal anything clearly, but enough to suggest that the day is slowly moving toward its later form. The boy feels this only as a quiet awareness, not as thought, but as a subtle change in atmosphere, a feeling that things are continuing forward in their usual calm progression. He adjusts his posture once more, a small, natural movement. His fingers briefly ease their grip. Then he continues, line after line, symbol after symbol, each one identical in effort, each one part of the same long, steady process that does not seek variation or change. The room remains silent except for the soft sound of writing, a sound so constant that it no longer stands out, but becomes part of the stillness itself, blending into the atmosphere like breath. Outside, the world remains distant and unseen, but present in suggestion, in the faint awareness that life continues beyond these walls in its own slow rhythm. Inside, nothing interrupts the flow. No sudden moments, no breaks, only continuity, only repetition, only the gentle passage of time expressed through ink, surface, and steady movement. And as the day continues to unfold without urgency or distinction, the boy remains seated in the same place he began, writing in the same careful way, carried forward by a rhythm so familiar that it no longer feels like something he is doing, but something he is simply part of, quietly, steadily, endlessly continuing.
As the day continues to unfold in its quiet and steady way, there is a sense that even the idea of middle or end has begun to blur, as if time itself no longer wants to divide itself into clear pieces, but prefers instead to remain one long, continuous flow of calm repetition. The boy writes. His hand moves without interruption, each motion small and precise, guided less by thought now and more by memory, as though the shapes on the page are already known to his fingers before they are even formed. The reed touches the surface. Ink appears. Lines extend forward in familiar patterns, and each line leads into the next without hesitation, without pause, without anything that would separate one moment of work from another. Around him the room remains unchanged, still bodies, quiet focus, the same steady rhythm of writing that has filled every corner of the space since the beginning of the day, and perhaps even longer than that, as if this room exists outside of ordinary time, where each day is only a continuation of the one before it. The teacher stands in silence for a while, not moving much, not speaking, just observing. And in that silence there is no pressure, no tension, only a quiet presence that reinforces the calm structure of the lesson, as if even authority here exists in a softened form, without urgency or force. The boy continues, line after line, symbol after symbol. There is no feeling of progress in the usual sense, no awareness of moving toward something different, only the gentle accumulation of repetition, like sand slowly gathering in a still place. The light changes again, barely noticeable at first, a slight shift in tone, a softer angle falling across the floor, shadows stretching a little further than before, and with it comes a quiet awareness that the day is continuing its slow descent, though nothing in the room demands attention or reaction to that fact. The boy adjusts his position slightly, a small easing of his shoulders, a brief pause in pressure. Then he resumes writing. The rhythm remains unbroken. The sound of reed on surface continues softly, evenly, blending into the atmosphere so completely that it feels less like a sound and more like part of the silence itself. The teacher walks again between the rows, slow steps, measuring presence. He pauses briefly behind a student, then moves on, offering no interruption to the flow of work. The boy does not look up. There is no need. Everything remains in its place. Everything continues as expected. Outside, the world is still distant, still quiet, still moving in its own unseen way, while inside, the repetition of writing continues to hold the space in a steady and unchanging rhythm. The boy finishes another line, then begins the next, and there is no difference between them that matters in this moment, only the continuation of the same calm action, repeated again and again, as time passes gently forward, without urgency, without distinction, without anything to break its soft and steady flow.
As the afternoon settles deeper into its final stretch, the room seems to grow quieter in a way that is not caused by any change in sound, but by a slow softening of attention, as if everything inside it has gradually learned how to exist with less effort, less resistance, and less awareness of anything beyond the steady rhythm of the moment. The boy continues to write, but now, even the act of writing feels like it belongs to something larger and more continuous than himself, as though his hand is simply following a path that has already been traced countless times before and will continue to be traced long after this moment has passed. The reed moves. Ink appears. Lines form with quiet regularity. And each line is almost indistinguishable from the one before it, not because they lack care, but because they are shaped by repetition so complete that variation no longer seems necessary. Around him, the students remain in their places, still, focused, silent in that deep and familiar way that has filled the entire day from its beginning, and perhaps even longer than that, as if the idea of interruption does not truly belong in this space at all. The teacher stands once more at the front. His presence is steady, unchanged, but there is a subtle sense that the structure of the day is nearing its natural close, not through any announcement, but through the quiet way his movements have slowed, his pauses grown longer, his silence more present than his speech. The boy continues without looking up. His hand moves in small, practiced motions, forming symbols that feel less like individual decisions and more like a continuous flow that simply passes through him. The light in the room has softened further, not dim, but gentler, as if the day is slowly lowering its voice. Shadows stretch quietly across the floor, resting where they fall, unmoving, patient and calm. There is no sense of urgency anywhere, not in the teacher, not in the students, not in the air itself. Only continuation, only repetition, only the steady, familiar act of writing that fills each passing moment without breaking it into parts. The boy completes another line, and for a brief instant there is a slight pause, not a stop, not an end, but a natural easing of movement, like a breath held gently before being released again. Then he continues. But now something subtle is different, not in the task, not in the environment, but in the feeling that accompanies it. A quiet awareness that the day is approaching its final turning point, even if no one says it, even if nothing marks it clearly. The teacher speaks one last time, a short phrase, soft and even, and then silence returns fully, settling over the room like something complete. The boy writes the final lines of his work without haste, without expectation, without any sense of urgency to finish quickly. And when the last line is formed, he simply stops. There is no sudden moment of ending, only a natural quietness that follows the completion of the task. Around him, others begin to slow as well, their movements easing, their hands lowering,
as the shared understanding of completion passes through the room without words. Tools are gathered slowly, carefully, as if even the act of ending must remain part of the same gentle rhythm that shaped the entire day. The boy stands. His body feels the quiet weight of long stillness, but it is not uncomfortable, only present, like the soft memory of time spent in one place. He turns with the others, and together they begin to leave the school, stepping out into the softened light of late afternoon once more. Outside, the air is calm. The village waits in its usual evening quiet, and as the boy walks home along the familiar path, the day does not feel like something that ended abruptly, but something that slowly dissolved, like light fading into dusk, leaving behind only calmness, only stillness, only the gentle continuation of a life that moves, always, in the same quiet rhythm.
Evening arrives in its usual quiet way, not as a sharp ending, but as a slow settling, where the brightness of the day gently loosens its hold on the land and allows a softer tone to spread across everything it touches. The boy walks home. His steps are steady, unhurried, almost automatic, as if the long hours of writing have left his body moving in the same calm rhythm even after the work itself has ended. The path beneath him is familiar in every small detail, the same uneven ground, the same narrow turns between simple homes, the same quiet sense of distance that never feels long or short, but only known. Around him, the village is entering its evening state, not busy, not silent, but gently in between. People move slowly, voices remain low, and even the sounds of life seem softened, as if everything has agreed, without speaking, to lower itself into calmness as night approaches. The boy does not think about the school anymore in clear pieces. It is no longer a collection of lessons or moments. It has become a single continuous feeling, long hours of writing, repetition, stillness, and quiet focus blending together into something that now rests behind him like a soft memory. He reaches his home, steps inside. The air is cooler here, carrying the faint trace of the day that has passed, and there is no need for explanation or discussion about what happened, because nothing unusual has happened at all. A simple meal is prepared. It is quiet, uncomplicated, eaten slowly, without urgency, in the same gentle manner that has shaped every other part of the day. The boy sits still afterward for a while, not doing anything in particular, just resting in the calm after movement, allowing the body to ease itself out of the long stillness of writing and into the softness of evening. Outside, the sky continues to change. The light fades gradually, losing its brightness in stages rather than all at once, until everything becomes tinted with the calm colors of approaching night. There is no sense of surprise in any of this, only familiarity, only repetition, only the steady rhythm of days that always follow the same path from morning to evening, from waking to sleep, from writing to rest. The boy lies down. The woven mat beneath him is the same as before, shaped by countless nights of the same quiet ending. His body relaxes easily now, as if it already knows what comes next, without needing thought or instruction. The sounds of the village fade further. The air cools gently, and his eyes close without effort. Sleep arrives slowly, not as a sudden change, but as a soft fading of awareness, like the last light of day disappearing into the horizon. And once again, everything becomes still.
The world continues its quiet cycle outside, the Nile flowing, the land resting, the sky turning through its endless rhythm of night and morning. But within the small home there is only calm, only rest, only the quiet pause between one day and the next. And somewhere in that deep stillness, the promise of tomorrow waits, unchanged and certain, ready to begin again in exactly the same gentle way.
Night holds the world in a quiet stillness that feels complete, as if nothing beyond it needs to move or change. And in that deep calm, the boy sleeps without interruption, his body resting in the same simple position it has learned through countless nights of repetition. There is no urgency in his sleep, no disturbance, only the steady rhythm of breathing, soft and even, blending into the silence around him. The village remains still, the homes remain dark, and beyond everything, the Nile continues its slow, unseen journey, carrying the land forward in a way that does not ask to be noticed, but simply exists as it always has. Time passes without shape in the night, not measured, not marked, only flowing gently forward. And in that flow, the boy remains resting as he always does, held within the same familiar pattern of ending and beginning that defines each day without needing to be named. Then, gradually, the first hint of change returns. Not light yet, not sound, only a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a quiet easing at the edges of darkness that suggests the world is preparing, once again, to turn toward morning. The boy stirs slightly, a small movement, a natural response to the slow return of day that has happened so many times before that even sleep begins to recognize it. Outside, the sky begins its familiar transformation. Darkness loosens, softness spreads, and the earliest suggestion of dawn gathers gently at the horizon, without hurry, without announcement. Inside, the boy remains still for a moment longer, caught between rest and waking, between silence and the beginning of movement. And then, as always, awareness returns in stages, not sharply, but slowly, as if the day is not arriving, but unfolding itself into existence. He will rise soon. He will walk the same path again. He will enter the same school again. He will sit in the same stillness, write the same lines, repeat the same patterns, and live through the same quiet rhythm that has already shaped so many days before this one. But for now, there is only this gentle in-between moment, the calm before motion, the softness before repetition begins again. And in that stillness, everything remains peaceful, unchanged, and quietly waiting for the morning to arrive once more.
Morning arrives again in its familiar, unhurried way, as if it has never truly been absent, only resting for a short while before returning to the world with the same soft light and the same quiet rhythm that has shaped every previous beginning. The boy wakes. There is no suddenness in it, only a slow return to awareness, as if sleep gently steps aside rather than ends, and the body is allowed to rise back into the same steady pattern it has already learned so well. The air is cool, still, and the room around him holds the same calm simplicity as always, unchanged, waiting, familiar in every detail. He sits up, pauses for a moment, and listens to the faint presence of the morning beyond the walls, where life is already beginning again in soft and ordinary ways. Nothing feels different from the day before. Nothing feels new. Only continuation, only repetition. He prepares himself in the same quiet manner as always, gathering what is needed without thought or hesitation, his movements small, practiced and unbroken by uncertainty. Outside, the light grows slowly. It does not rush. It does not arrive all at once. It simply spreads across the land in gentle stages, touching the village, the paths, the riverbanks, and everything else with the same calm presence that has always marked the beginning of the day. The boy steps outside. The world is already in motion, but in a soft and measured way, as if everything has agreed to begin together without noise or urgency. Other children appear along the path, joining him as they always do, forming the same quiet stream of movement toward the school, where the day will begin again in its familiar structure. No one speaks in any meaningful way. There is no need. The routine itself carries them forward. The school stands ahead, unchanged, simple, still, waiting. And when the boy enters, there is no sense of arrival, only continuation, as if he had never truly left this place at all. He takes his seat, places his tools before him, and waits in quiet stillness as the teacher stands at the front, already prepared to begin the same lesson, the same instruction, the same calm repetition that has defined every previous day. A phrase is spoken, soft, even, familiar, and the reed touches the surface once more. Ink forms lines, lines form structure, and structure becomes the steady rhythm of writing that fills the room without interruption. The boy writes, as he always does, without urgency, without resistance, without anything needing to change. The day unfolds again in its calm and continuous way, carrying him forward through hours that do not feel separate from one another, but instead blend together into a single long experience of repetition and stillness. And in that repetition, there is no ending in sight, only the gentle, unbroken continuation of a life lived in quiet rhythm, as steady as the river, as soft as the morning light, and as endlessly familiar as the days that always return.
As the morning deepens once more into its steady rhythm, the room inside the school remains unchanged in its quiet structure, as if it has no interest in marking time in clear divisions, but only in continuing the same gentle pattern of writing, silence, and focus that has already become the natural state of everything within it. The boy writes. His hand moves with the ease of habit now, no longer needing to pause or consider each motion, but simply allowing the familiar shapes to form as they always have, guided by repetition that has slowly replaced uncertainty with calm certainty. The reed touches the surface, ink appears, and the lines extend forward in a steady flow, each one following the last without interruption, without variation that matters, without anything that would break the quiet continuity of the work. Around him, the other students remain seated in the same still positions, their attention fixed inward, their movements small and controlled, all of them sharing the same unspoken understanding that the day will continue in this manner for as long as it needs to, without urgency or change. The teacher stands at the front, silent for a time, then speaking again in a calm, measured tone, offering the next line, the next instruction, the next familiar phrase that has been heard so many times it no longer feels new, but instead feels like part of the room itself. The boy listens when needed, then continues writing. There is no separation between instruction and action anymore, only flow, only repetition, only the steady continuation of a task that has become as natural as breathing. The light in the room shifts slightly, as it always does, moving through subtle changes that are felt more than seen, a soft adjustment in brightness that suggests the passage of time without needing to announce it. The boy adjusts his posture, a small easing of the body after long stillness. Then he returns fully to the page, continuing the same careful motions as before, line after line, symbol after symbol, each one forming within the same quiet structure that holds the entire room together. Outside, the world remains distant and calm, existing beyond the walls in its own slow rhythm,
while inside, everything is contained within this single, continuous act of writing. The teacher moves again between the rows, slow steps, quiet presence. He pauses briefly, observes, then continues without interruption, allowing the rhythm of the room to remain unbroken. The boy does not look up. There is no reason to. Everything remains as expected. Everything continues as it always has. And so the day carries forward, not in sharp moments or distinct changes, but in a smooth and unbroken flow where each hour blends gently into the next, and the act of writing becomes the only measure of time that exists. Steady, calm, unchanging, as if the world itself has agreed to move at this pace and remain there without ever needing to be anything else.
As the day slowly begins to lean toward its quiet end, there is a soft and natural feeling in the room, as if everything that has happened since morning has been gently guiding itself toward this final stillness all along, without needing direction, without needing notice, without ever needing to be anything other than what it already is. The boy writes. But now something subtle has changed, not in the task, not in the room, but in the feeling of it, a quiet awareness that this is the last stretch, the final continuation of a rhythm that has carried him through the entire day, just as it has carried him through so many days before this one. His hand moves steadily, reed touching surface, ink forming familiar lines, and each line feels slightly lighter now, not in effort but in meaning, as if the act of writing is gently approaching its natural pause. Around him, the room is still. The other students continue in the same calm silence, their movements unchanged, their focus steady. But there is a shared softness in the atmosphere, a sense that the structure holding the day is slowly relaxing, like a long breath being released. The teacher stands at the front, no longer speaking often, only observing. His presence remains, but it is quieter now, as if even authority itself has settled into the same calm ending that the rest of the room is moving toward. The boy finishes another line, then another, and then slowly there is a moment where the movement does not immediately continue. Not a stop forced or sudden, but a natural pause that arrives on its own, as if the rhythm has finally reached the place it was always heading toward. He lowers the reed and does not lift it again. Around him others begin to do the same, one by one, quietly, without announcement, without change in expression, only the soft understanding that the work is complete. The teacher speaks once, a final phrase, simple, calm, and then silence returns fully to the room, deeper than before, not empty, but complete, as if everything that needed to be said has already been said through the act of repetition itself. The boy gathers his tools, carefully, slowly, as if even the ending of the day must remain within the same gentle rhythm that carried the beginning. He stands. The others stand with him, and together they leave the school in the same quiet formation in which they have done so many times before, though now it feels slightly different, not because anything has changed, but because there is a soft sense of completion resting over everything. Outside, the air is calm. The light is lower now. Evening has fully arrived. The village moves in its slow and peaceful way, and the boy walks home along the familiar path, not thinking of the day in sharp details, but feeling it as one long, continuous flow that has now gently come to rest. There is no excitement in the ending, no sudden realization, only quiet acceptance, only stillness. He arrives home, eats, sits, and eventually lies down as the sky deepens into night once more, the same night that has come so many times before and will come again in the same gentle way. His eyes close, his body rests,
and the world outside continues its endless, calm rhythm, the river moving, the wind soft across the land, the sky slowly turning through its familiar cycle. And in that quiet, final stillness, there is nothing left to follow, nothing left to continue, nothing left to repeat. Only the sense that life itself, in this distant time and place, moves like a soft and unbroken stream, always flowing, always returning, always gently fading into rest.